Welcome to Nine&Thrive, where we thrive to help women entrepreneurs' life a little bit easier. We provide the Nine&Thrive framework to help you with legal, financial, and strategic planning to help grow and scale your business. Today, I have our mentor, Miss Antoinette. She is our legal counsel here for intellectual property, and she's going to share some information with us today to help us with our legal matters. After her presentation, there will be a Q&A session where you'll be allowed to ask her a few questions. Don't be shy. Take advantage of this time to ask a professional your questions. So I'm going to pass on this meeting over to Ms. Antoinette Martin, Esquire, and for her presentation.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Up, it says I need approval to share.
That is a new thing. So one moment. Let's see. How can I? And I can't see the. Oh, there's your three dots. Allow screen sharing. Okay, you should now have the ability to share your screen.
Okay, let's see. All right, can you see my screen? It looks a little wonky. Can you see my screen?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay, perfect. Can you see my PowerPoint?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So tonight, what I wanted to discuss with everybody was sort of the legal foundations before you make your first $100,000, right? So, like Tiffany said, I specialize in intellectual property, and I think that's an important first step, but it's not the only first step, right? So, we're going to focus today on talking about the right business structure, making sure you have your business licenses and permits, contracts and legal agreements, of course, intellectual property, and that you're in compliance. We're not going to touch too much on taxes because those are questions mostly for CPAs, but I will talk a little bit about it. So, when you're choosing a business structure, right, these are going to be the four most common. And so you have a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and then an LLC and a corporation. So I kind of split these into two segments, right? In the sole proprietorship and the partnership are less liability protection, and the LLC and corporation are what I would call complete liability protection, as long as you're adhering to certain requirements. And so a sole proprietorship is good for you if you have a sort of simple business, right? Low liability. I would say things like a side hustle. It's not necessarily your full time business, it's something that maybe you're just selling simple products. The liability is very low. There's a very low chance that you would be sued. Then you may operate under a sole proprietorship. Partnership, same thing, right? If you and a partner get together, you have very low liability. You may want to go ahead and set up a partnership, just operate that way. LLCs and corporations are a little bit different. So, LLCs and corporation afford you liability protection. An LLC is less formal than a corporation. Corporations have very strong liability protection, but there are a lot more formalities associated with corporations. So, like I said, in sole proprietorships and partnerships, you have unlimited personal liability. And what that means is if something goes wrong with the business, you can be sued personally. With LLCs and corporations, if something goes wrong with the business, normally you don't get sued. Now, there are some caveats there. If you're commingling funds, if you're using business funds to pay for personal things, people may be able to what we call pierce the corporate veil, sort of disregard your entity status. But for most people, corporations and LLCs are going to afford you liability protection. Sole proprietorships and partnerships are passed through taxation. What that means is the business doesn't get taxed, doesn't get income tax. It passes through as profits to you personally. You can do the same thing with LLCs. Corporations can face double taxation, which means the corporation pays tax and you also pay taxes on proceeds from the corporation as well. Okay. Corporations require a lot more formalities. They have boards and shareholder meetings. You need to keep minutes. You need to make sure that you're adhering to all of these formalities because they will ask you for these things. Sometimes even the IRS will ask you for these things. LLCs and partnerships have fewer governance requirements, but I would say an important part of structuring your LLC is having an operating agreement. An operating agreement tells everybody what they can do, when the LLC can be dissolved, who's in charge of the LLC, what everybody's role is, what everybody's responsibility is, right? Okay. So when you decide, once you've decided on what structure you're going to set up, you want to select a unique name. The state is not going to allow you to have the same name as somebody else that's already existing in business. But here is an important caveat there. Just because the state won't allow you guys to have the same business name doesn't mean that registering with the state, you own the name, right? That's not what that means at all. That's just because the state doesn't want to have to sort through who owns what, right? Which LLC is this? Which corporation is this? It does not mean ownership. Once you have selected a business name and you've passed it through and you've made sure nobody else has it, you want to go ahead, file your formation documents. So if you're a corporation, that's going to include articles of incorporation. If you're an LLC, that can include your operating agreement. Once you've done that and you've been approved, I would say wait until you've been approved by the state. Then you want to go ahead and apply with the IRS for your EIN number, register for state taxes if they apply. And you can probably expect that most states, I would say in Georgia, when I set up mine's a professional corporation, when I set up my PC, it took them about 2 weeks to get it fully up and running. Okay. So here is an important step I think that sometimes we miss, right? And so I'll just use lawyers as an example because lawyers is something I'm familiar with. So when lawyers graduate law school, they have to go sit for the state bar, right? When doctors graduate medical school, they have to sit for state board exams. So these are pretty common things, right? You know, if your industry requires a license, but permits are not always something that people are aware of. Sometimes we start operating businesses and we don't have the correct permits to set out signs. We don't have the correct permits for zoning. Sometimes we're operating businesses outside of our homes and our homes aren't even zoned correctly for us to operate businesses out of our homes. So these are all things that we want to verify and check on the local level to make sure that we're adhering to. So this is a great example. Restaurants require health permits, liquor licenses, food handler certifications. Construction, they need building permits, safety inspections. Retail, they need permits for signs. Sometimes, you know, you need to make sure you're actually zoned for a commercial building. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are renewing your business every year. Some states will allow you to extend it out 2 years, so that way you don't have to renew it every year. You pay your fees. You want to make sure your permits are renewed, that any licenses are renewed. We attorneys, we have to renew our license every year. We make sure you're adhering to any continuing education requirements for your licenses. Okay, so this, I would say, beyond the structure and beyond the intellectual property, which we'll get to later, I would say clear contracts are essential, right? And not that we're using one contract for everything and we're just sort of tailoring this one contract for everybody that we're doing business with, but that we have specific contracts that we're using for specific matters. So if I have an employee agreement, that is the only thing that I'm using that contract for. If I have a vendor contract, that is the only thing I'm using that contract for. And that's important. And it's important. I tell everybody, you want to contract with everybody, right? If I'm doing business with my mother, I'm going to have a contract because the contract is going to tell us how we're supposed to operate, what happens if we're not operating that way, how we can resolve this dispute. Am I liable for certain things? It's a clear roadmap, right? It makes it easy for us to do business, right? Everybody knows their rights and responsibilities when we have clear and good contracts. So if you have, like I said, if you have employment agreements, you want to make sure, one, clarify what's an employee versus what's an independent contractor. Just because you call them an independent contractor doesn't mean they're actually independent contractors. Independent contractors operate completely separate from your business. Employees are people that you have more control over. And so you want to make sure that your agreement is clear as to what these people are in your business. Because if it's sort of muddled, it's not clear, then when it comes time to file in the court may consider them an employee. Okay, NDAs and confidentiality agreements. NDAs are so important. If you have trade secrets, if you have sort of processes that you may not be able to protect with a trademark or a copyright or a patent, you have these NDAs which allow you to protect, to stop anybody from sharing any of your business information, right? Contractually. And you want to make sure when you have these NDAs that they're detailed enough that they clearly define what the penalty is for violating this NDA. If you breach this NDA, you owe me this much in damages. We expect this amount in damages. Plus, you're going to have to pay my attorney's fees because I had to sue you for violating this NDA. You want all of that to be clear in your contracts. It's so important to one, have contracts, and then two, have clear contracts. Okay. And then intellectual property is my favorite subject, trademarking, names, and logos. So in 2023, the USPTO had 450,000 applications on file. There are a lot of people filing trademark applications. You'll find that if you go into the USPTO website and you type in a name, there are a lot of names that are already taken. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go for a trademark. You should say, you know what, I'm just going to keep operating. That means we just have to keep searching for more unique names to make sure that we're not infringing and make sure that there's no confusion in the marketplace, right? So when you trademark names, logos, slogans. I say, think Nike, just do it, the swoosh symbol, okay? Copyrights for original content, right? If you write a book, you fix it in a tangible form, automatically copyrighted. You register the copyright with the Copyright Office so that you hold on to your right to sue if somebody's infringing on your copyright. And patents are a little different. They are usually for unique processes, inventions. You'll usually see them in technology, medicine, things like that. You need a patent attorney to do patents. So this is deeper than just getting an attorney licensed by the state. So I'm licensed by the State Bar of Georgia. I'm also patent eligible. So I'm going to go sit for the patent bar, which is administered by the USPTO. And then I'll have the extra step necessary to actually do patents. But patents do require that you have an additional certification. So all attorneys can't do a patent for you, and patent attorneys consist of less than 1% of the population. So there's a very small number of patent attorneys out there because they do require a science background. Okay, so I would say it's pretty common for small businesses to miss tax deadlines, right? A lot of people don't even know that you can sign up to pay your taxes quarterly and that you should sign up to pay your taxes quarterly to avoid late fees, avoid, these heavier payments on the back end of the year. You don't have to wait until the tax deadline. You can sign up, pay your taxes quarterly, right? You want to make sure that you have proper financial records. You want to make sure first that you're keeping track of what you're spending money on. You want to make sure that you're not spending any money on personal things through your business account, right? That's so important, especially when you have an LLC and a corporation. Don't spend any money on your personal matters. You don't want any liability coming back on you because you are commingling these funds. And then you want to make sure you keep documents all the way up until 7 years. Okay? Like I said, you can schedule quarterly and annual tax submissions. You want to make sure you maintain the board meetings, record minutes. Like I told you before, if you have a corporation, you want to make sure you renew all your licensing, and you want to make sure that your contracts adhere to all laws, right? Some industries do have different laws. And so sometimes I would say, even when you're seeking an attorney to assist you with this, you may want to go for an attorney who is pretty familiar with your specific industry, right? And so I will use construction as an example. So I don't work with construction, right? So I would direct somebody who needs construction contracts to an attorney that's very familiar with construction contracts. That way they can make sure they're adhering to all of the state requirements for construction contracts. Okay. So I think it's important to have a very strong legal foundation, because when you start your business off with a strong legal foundation, you'll find that a lot of the legal problems that small businesses run into on the back end, you won't run into. You'll have your contracts in place, you'll have all your proper permits and licenses and things like that. Okay, so do you guys have any questions for me? I know I
Oh
dumped a
yeah,
lot of information all at once.
that was a lot. That was fantastic, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. And before we open it up to the floor for questions,
Mm-hmm.
I do have a couple of follow-ups from
Sure.
the presentation. So if you can
Mm-hmm.
go back and share your screen again.
Absolutely, yes.
So we're going to work our way backwards. So start from the back, the last slide.
Okay. All right, let's see. Let's go all the way to the end here.
Let's go all the way to slide 23.
Okay.
Okay, or 20, yeah, 23.
Okay.
So you concluded in that, there's certain industries as our resident attorney for our mentees, as well as being a mentor for those who are entering into the legal field.
Mm-hmm.
What industry would you say that you are a subject matter expert on for
I
your?
would, yeah. I would say anything retail, beauty, anything educational, entertainment. I would say there's very little that I'm not familiar with. Construction is something that's highly regulated, and there are very particular requirements for construction workers, for contractors, and things like that. And so I wouldn't say I can't handle it, but I would feel more comfortable directing you to somebody who is more familiar. And so I would say, if you're in a highly regulated industry, right? A very highly regulated industry, sometimes it's better to find legal counsel who specializes in that. And there are a lot of people who have niched down into specific industries, especially when they're highly regulated. Because when there are a lot of moving parts to it, you want somebody who's very familiar with that, who they work with this day in, day out, right? I have yet to have anybody bring a construction contract to me. And so I probably would direct you somewhere else, because I wouldn't want to lead you astray.
No, that's fair, and that makes a lot of sense. Can we go back to slide 22?
Yes, we can.
So slide 22 speaks a lot about tax preparation. Just for
Mm-hmm.
your information's sake, our resident accountant is online, Miss Stephanie Thompson. She is a certified CPA. And so for anyone who has questions, if you're watching the replay and you have questions, please put your questions in the comments. If you are in the mentorship program and watching this replay, please put your questions and comments in the community for either the accountant to respond or for our attorney here to respond to your questions. Take advantage of this specific world-class knowledge, because that is truly what this is. Um, you mentioned about filing quarterly, um, filing, on a schedule. I'm going to pivot
Mm-hmm.
this question over to our accountant. Stephanie, can you speak to the ability for those? I mean, this is tax season. Just on the schedules of tax. Uh-oh, we had a little technical difficulty here. One moment. Oh, we're back. Okay. I'm not really sure what happened there. It still says it's recording, so um, Stephanie, I don't know if you're able to come off mute, but would you be able to share just maybe some deadlines for filing quarterly for 2026? And what's the deadline to file your to file your taxes this year? Because I heard that there was some movement in that space, and I'm just not sure. Okay, she may not be able to come off mute. I don't know what this technology thing is doing. Okay. Well, if she does get an opportunity to come back, I'd love for her to share that. That would be great.
Yes.
Um, if we can talk about patent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go back.
Um,
Yeah.
so patent and copywriting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just to kind of clarify, when is it appropriate to copyright something versus creating a patent for something?
Okay.
Can you give us a little more clarity around that?
Sure. So here's what I don't want you to think that IP is one or the other, right? Sometimes there are cases where both may apply, right? I would say that you run into that more with trademarks and copyrights, but patents are for sort of, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, that background noise. That was my son.
Okay, no, it's no problem. So, patents are more for inventions, right? Patents are, I want you to think about the Apple iPhone. And so, when Apple, and also think about the Samsung Galaxy, because this was a big lawsuit that was happening, and they both were suing each other. And they were suing each other both in America, and they were suing each other in South Korea as well. And so, they both had patents for the technology for their phones. And so patents are something that you really run into usually with technology and medicine. That's not the only way you run into it, right? But that is usually where you're going to run into patents. Patents are about unique inventions. You've made an improvement on an already existing invention, or you've created something completely new and different that you think qualifies for a patent.
Oh,
Copyright. Oh, go
okay,
ahead.
so just a question for that, just from the example
Mm-hmm.
you gave.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to create, say, a lot of people are creating apps.
Mm-hmm.
If they create a unique app that does something specific, do they need to copyright it or do they need to patent that? Because apps itself exist, right? so,
Exactly. Exactly.
so which
So
one do you
that's
do?
yeah, that's a very good distinction, right? You're not going to patent that app because apps themselves already exist. So unless you've created some unique process to create an app, you don't need a patent, right? You need probably a trademark for the name of your app, which is going to fall into class 9 for apps, right? And then you also probably need a copyright for your app once you've affixed it in a tangible form. And like I said, as soon as you have affixed your app in a tangible form, and I know that apps aren't tangible, and so what we mean when we say tangible is I can go on there and I can download it, right? It's something I
Mhm.
can look at and see. So once you've affixed it in a tangible form, that copyright has attached to that app automatically. You don't have to do anything. It's already copyrighted. But what you have to do is register with the Copyright Office so that you can sue. As you can see there, it says it enables statutory damages, attorney's fees, and stronger enforcement options. So copyrights themselves is about, in a way, it's about unique things, but it's about original works that you create, like software, like books, like pictures. If a photographer takes a picture at your wedding and you don't have them sign a work for hire agreement, they maintain a copyright ownership of your wedding pictures simply because they took that picture with their camera.
You know what?
So
I see this on People's Court all the time. Well, it's no longer People's Court, but yes, yes, I see that all the time. Okay, that's
yeah.
interesting.
hmm
Wow.
So that's what copyrights are. And so patents are always going to be about unique processes, a unique inventions. You've invented something new, something never heard of before, right? Copyrights are, we've heard of books before, right? But I wrote a book. I wrote my own original book. I
Mhm,
created my own original app. I've drawn my own original picture. I've taken my own original pictures, right?
mhm.
Let's say somebody comes up with a unique camera, a new camera invention, then they may be able to get a patent for that camera invention. But actually taking the picture themselves, that's copyright.
Okay, so I have a specific question for you because there was a lawsuit going around for Shein.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a lot of artists that are mentees, um, whether they're designing clothes or actually making art. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen where there is some controversy about Shein copying people's clothing designs and
Mm-hmm.
selling it for cheaper, whether it's, name brand or not. And
Right.
um, they're just like, is that something, if you have a person who's designing clothing, and they see a dupe on Shein or any other platform, because Shein's not the only one. There's like, was it? Oh, I can't think of the others.
It's like Timu,
Temu
Shein. Yeah,
and
there's a few of them.
yeah, there's a few of them. So if
Mm-hmm.
there is a duplicate of what they're designing, um, and it's pretty obvious, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
cheaper material. Is this
Mm-hmm.
something that someone they would hire someone like you to fight for them? Would they
Yeah.
have to have a copyright on the design in advance, or can it be something where it's obvious where they made the artifact or the art, like it's obvious that they
Mm-hmm.
made it and that it was duplicated? Like,
Yeah, so I would say we always have common law rights when it pertains to intellectual property. And
okay.
so when I'm saying you need to register a copyright, you need to register a trademark, you need to file for a patent, that's not me saying that somebody can come and just steal your stuff because you haven't registered, but it kind of is, right? So if they beat you to it, registering it or copyrighting it, it
Oh, we
becomes
know
much more
Shein ain't
difficult.
copywriting. They
Right,
know
right.
that. They just making it.
Now, I think the larger problem with Shein is where they're originating, right? So these people have the right to their designs, right? Shein has no right to steal their designs. The problem you're running into is Shein is a Chinese company. And
Mhm,
so you can have a copyright in America, you
mhm.
can have a patent in America, and you can have a trademark in America. And that means nothing overseas, right? And there's some obviously some caveats to that, right? But generally, you need to, if you're going to be selling your things worldwide, you need to have trademark protection in each country you plan on operating in.
Ooh,
Other
what
countries
do
have
they
different
include?
rules. They have different structures for their intellectual property protection. And I'll be honest with you, China doesn't care about America's intellectual property protection, right? China, they don't care. And so you can go over there and you can file for a trademark and you can, register a copyright and you can file for a patent in China and they will still allow their companies to steal your designs because they don't care.
Got it.
Um, yeah. So that's more so what we're running into with things like Shein. It's not that you don't have the right. Yes, you have a copyright. In some cases, you may even have a design patent that protects your designs. In some cases, you may even have a trademark. If you go on and look at Nike, sometimes they have trademarks for their shoe designs. You may even have a trademark to protect your shoe design. But overall, the large struggle there is that China's not going to enforce our intellectual property rights because they don't care if their companies are infringing on our intellectual property rights.
Oh boy. Well, there's no easy solution
Mm-hmm.
to that. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that is interesting.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you see some of these knockoffs are so prevalent, right? And you hear people talking about the gate and they're talking about DH gate and things like that, right? And so it's a little difficult. We manufacture a lot of things in China, and so some of them have gotten really good at sort of mimicking the different brands and things. And so unless you're really familiar with some of these name brands and you're aware, like, hey, Coach actually didn't make that bag in that color, Givenchy actually didn't make those shoes in that color, those are knockoffs, right? A lot of people don't care and they just buy from these companies, there's no incentive for these companies to stop. And it's hard when China themselves won't enforce our intellectual property rights. And so basically, what you're hoping is that on the mass scale, most people are going to be aware that that is a lesser quality version of this product. If you come over here, you're going to get a higher quality product. And sometimes that's the importance of brand identity, right? Sometimes that's why Nike is Nike. It's not that Nike invented sneakers, it's that Nike has built up a brand recognition that means that I feel better about myself if I go to Nike.com and buy my shoes versus going to DHgate and buying a cheap version. And obviously, there's always going to be people who don't mind as much, but you figure on a mass scale, if most people want Nike, they're not going to go looking for Chinese knockoffs. They're going to go ahead and go to Nike and buy Nike.
Right. Okay. Um, Going back to the contracts. Let's see. I have one more question. What agreement should a business owner have in place from day one?
Okay. I would say always say client contracts, right? If you're going into business, you're probably going to have clients. I would also say vendor contracts because depending on the type of business that you have, you're very likely going to have vendors. And employment contracts may not be as important because you may not have employees to start. But independent contractor contracts are important because I would say there are going to be people that you hire to do things for your business and you want these independent contractor contracts on file. I would say a work for hire agreement. So that way, when you're hiring people to develop your website and you're hiring people to draw your logo, that they understand that they are operating within the scope of their employment. And so they're not maintaining any sort of copyright over your intellectual property. And I would also say that these NDAs are very important to protect any information that you don't want put out there.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, so you touched on my next question just a little bit. What clauses inside of those freelancer contracts should we have in order to protect our intellectual property?
Sure. So like I said, one, you want to make sure that in any contract you have, anytime somebody is being authorized to use your intellectual property in any way, you want to make sure that it's clear the scope that they're allowed to use it in, the time limit. You don't want to give people a perpetual a right to use your intellectual property. You want to say you can use it for these 3 months that we're working together. You can use it to develop my website. You can use it to develop my logo, right? That's it. You want to limit the amount of time, the scope that they're using it. And then you want to make sure that, especially if they're using it in any sort of manner to generate any revenue, you want to make sure that the compensation structure for using your intellectual property is clear. Never allow anybody to use your intellectual property to make money without compensating you. In client contracts, I think the most important thing is one, to list, like I told you, the scope and the time limit. And then two, the most important term I think you can put in any contract is that what is on this paper, what we're signing here, constitutes the entire agreement. no matter what we talked about outside of this constitutes the entire agreement. So that way nobody can come back later and say, oh, well, she actually told me I could use her trademark for 6 months. And now she's saying I could only use it for 3 months. No, the contract said 3 months. That's what we agreed to.
That's really good for people who starting out their
Mm-hmm.
businesses. We have people at different phases of their business
Mm-hmm.
life cycle. So starting their business, in the middle of their business, and now as they begin to grow and scale, what sort of contracts or protections should they have to scale when they're
Okay.
growing their
Yeah.
business? Because I'm sure that there's, maybe a few things that might be more unique.
Yeah. So I would say licensing agreements are usually what you start to get as people scale, right? And licensing agreements is basically uh, kind of like a combination of a few contracts, right? In a licensing agreement, I'm basically saying I'm going to allow you to use my intellectual property for this purpose, right? And you're going to pay me this amount. I'll use a franchise agreement because to me, a franchise agreement is essentially like a licensing agreement. So McDonald's is going to license out their name to franchisees and allow them to use the name McDonald's, and then the franchisees are obviously going to make money off of the McDonald's brand recognition, but McDonald's is going to own the building, and McDonald's is going to detail sort of how they're allowed to use the name, what they're allowed to put on the menu, things like that. Licensing agreements, franchise agreements are important as you start to scale. I would say that you may even find when you start to scale that that's when you actually want to invest in employment agreements, because this is where you actually may start to hire employees. You have the money to hire employees on. And this is where it becomes very important to clarify, is this an employee or is this an independent contractor? That's so important. And you want to make sure those agreements are structured to be clear that this is an employee versus this is an independent contractor.
Perfect. I'm going to give a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions.
I actually do. I'm been working as she's talking, I was trying to cut in, but a client was talking at the same time. So I did want to add a couple things to what she
Hmm.
said about the quarterly. So quarterly is April 15th, June 15th, and September 15th and January 15th filing. If especially if you feel that you're gonna owe like over $1,000 if you're a self-employed person, you feel like you might owe over $1,000. Like she was saying, break it up to quarterly so you won't owe as much. Also, what I did find that some of my clients been doing, if they're getting a refund this year, but next year they plan on starting their business and they might have self-employment, they'll take that refund and put it like to the side, like instead of the IRS sending them that refund, they'll apply it to next year's taxes. You can apply, Tiffany, you can apply your millions of dollars you get from your tax return to next year's taxes. You can do that as well. But a question for you, Antoinette. I have a client. He is starting his record label. He's about to
Hmm.
um start traveling. Well, he has already started traveling, but he was wanting an
Okay.
attorney that can help him with his branding and his trademark. Is it okay if I
Hmm.
make sure you give me your phone number so I can share the wealth with you? Because he, like I said, he's out traveling now and he's making pretty good right now, but he don't
Okay.
want anyone to steal his brand or his trademarks. So I didn't know
Absolutely.
personally a attorney, so now I know one personally. I can give them to hand them over to you.
Absolutely.
You
And
take
I
care of
will,
my
Absolutely.
baby.
I will
Yes,
share
we'd love to help.
what information is inside the mentorship program. All of her contact data is there. Antoinette, I am going to ask you to update your profile to add the
Okay.
links directly to your website. We do
Mm-hmm.
that
Sure.
later. I do have some links in there. And then once I share those, if there's any additional ways to contact you, I'd love for you to share those.
Absolutely, yes. And we'd absolutely love to
My
help him. Like
pleasure.
I said, IP is that's my baby, right? That's what I love to do. So, absolutely.
So if you're in the Nine&Thrive Mentorship Program, as you can see, we're live right now. This is where you would join a call when it's live. Antoinette is one of our mentors. So she has her own classroom, and you'll be able to click on the discovery call to schedule a 15-minute meeting with her at $30. You are also, if you are a member, you can ask questions in general here in the community section. You can write something and then address it to her, and she will get a message right away for that to answer that question. By doing so, this allows others inside of the mentorship program to also get a general question answered. Additionally, you'll be able to find out and learn a little bit more about Antoinette's history. You can follow her social media on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And so there are some ways to connect with her. You will be able to eventually go to her directly whenever you see an individual. You'll be able to go to their profile, and you'll be able to click on links to their website, their social media, and even message them directly if they allow that. This is her website, and you'll be able to find more about her and her practice overall. Did I cover all of the bases?
You did, yes.
Okay, very good. Did anyone else have any additional questions at this time? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. All right. Thank you so much for your time. The playbacks will be here. We had last month's playback replay here about trademarking. We're going to have this week's added into here for people's convenience. They can come back in and take a look and listen to the replay and share the information. Again, thank you for everyone's time here, and please leverage all of the resources for our students, whether you're here live or watching the replay. I do encourage you to come live because you can ask a question right away from an attorney at no additional cost, because these classes are included in your monthly mentorship program. So I will conclude this mentorship session at this time. And thank you so much. You guys hang on for one moment.